Varus is an extremely versatile champion. You can play him with lethality, with crit, with ability power, and with all sorts of hybrid builds. But because he is so versatile, it is quite hard to tell which playstyle is actually the strongest. How should you play him exactly if you want the best shot at winning your games? Well, in order to answer this question, I've analyzed what the highest ranked Varus player in the world is doing with the champion. The player in question is none other than the Korean pro player Hina, who is currently placed in Challenger Elo with almost 1400 LP. And since there is a lot we can learn from his playstyle, let's get right into it. Hina is exclusively playing on hit Varus, maxing Q first, W second and E last. His lethal tempo rune page is heavily early game focused, running Triumph, Legend Alacrity and Taste of Blood, with the scaling runes of Treasure Hunter and Last Stand. The latter has great synergy with his mythic item Shieldbow, which is essential to his playstyle, as you will see throughout the video. He rushes this item after Berserker's Greaves, and then pretty much always buys Rageblade, Wit's End and Hurricane. His late game options are mainly either Guardian Angel or Lord Dominic's Regards, depending on the circumstances. Hina opts for all these early game runes to make the most of Varus' huge DPS potential right away. Varus is an easy target for enemy engages because he is completely immobile, so Hina wants as much early power as possible so he can simply stat check his enemies when they force him to fight. He is also an extremely aggressive player himself, actively looking for fights even when facing early game powerhouses like Kalista. While most Varus players just farm from range and wait for their power spikes, the rank 1 player is proactive right from the start. His positioning in lane is always super aggressive, as he outright tries to encourage the enemy to take a fight with him. They will take the bait more often than not, since they know Varus is immobile, but Hina is never afraid to fully commit his cooldowns. After flashing the enemy crowd control, he knows he can deal more than enough damage back to them to force out their summoners as well. Varus is often mistakenly labeled a weak utility marksman due to his ultimate, but his damage potential is actually one of the highest in the game. This is especially obvious in full bot lane skirmishes when you can trigger Varus' passive. Your passive and lethal tempo amplify each other due to your passive's percent scaling, and paired with Triumph, Varus can then safely clean up the other enemies. Attack speed and flat health are by far the two most important combat stats in early game fights, which means you will always come out on top in these scenarios. All you need to do is kill the first target quickly to actually trigger your passive, but here Hina simply uses Varus' huge burst potential with Triple Blight stack into E, and then finishes the low health target with Triple Blight into W empowered Q for massive execute damage. However, perma all in is only necessary when the opponent forces you to. If they don't, you can actually get huge mileage out of Varus' above average range. This is especially important for 1v1 situations with opposing marksmen who cannot match your range, since you will be able to fully dictate the pace of the exchange until the supports return. Hina abuses this as much as possible by always playing just outside the enemy's range to create a health advantage, since he can then commit safely without needing to worry about opposing counterplay. Additionally, he will use his superior range to get lane priority by slowly wearing down the enemy bot lane over time. But even under tower, they won't be safe, since Varus' spells in fact also outrange the tower itself. Especially when you can let the minions stack by slow pushing, you can set up nasty tower dives which are relatively risk-free. Against lower ranged opponents, this strategy allows Hina to win the lane on the spot. But this is not just limited to the lane phase. Varus is an excellent skirmisher with just his basic spells and auto attacks, and as soon as you finish Berserker's Greaves, you can roam very effectively towards nearby fights. Again, Hina makes sure to burst down the first target, and then lets his passive and keystone take over from there. As long as you don't commit too early so you can reliably avoid opposing crowd control, there are hardly any duels Varus couldn't take. And while it is true that Hina is very aggressive right from level 1, he gets even more trigger happy when he unlocks Varus' ultimate. Varus is one of the strongest level 6 power spikes in all of bot lane, and if the enemy is foolish enough to disrespect his all-in potential, Hina will press R at even the smallest opportunity. But it is not just for dueling. In 2v2 situations, the ultimate is even more potent, since it doesn't matter which opponent you actually hit. As long as you hit somebody, good things will happen. Because of this, Hina effectively presses R on cooldown. No matter the situation or how promising it looks, as soon as there is somebody on his screen, he will try to ult them. More often than not, it will be worth it, because even if you end up trading for an opposing summoner, you still created an advantage for your team. Of course, it doesn't always work. No play has a 100% success rate. However, Hina still always goes for it. Yes, he might miss an ult here and there, and sometimes the enemy will just escape without much trouble, but his approach is you miss all the shots you don't take. And remember, Hina is playing against the best players on the planet, yet it is still possible to create openings where you can ult them outright. Anyway, I want you to appreciate how crazy good the enemy Kai'Sa player is. Sure, Blitzcrank dies to the all-in, but somehow this Kai'Sa finds an opening to both get the revenge kill on Thresh and still get away with her life. Korean Challenger is just insane. But yeah, especially against good opponents, it is important that you use all the techniques in the book to catch them off guard to actually connect with your ultimate, so here are the tricks Hina is using. Let's start with the most straightforward one, which is following up on an ally's crowd control. You should always take an opportunity like this, because it is low risk, very high reward. There is nothing the enemy can do to avoid it, and it will therefore often result in a kill. And one enemy down means numbers advantage for you, which is the easiest way to win a fight. You don't necessarily need an ally spell for this, as the slow from Varus' E-spell can serve the same purpose, and sometimes the enemy kind of CCs themselves with telegraphed movement, for example when they are stuck in stasis or teleport animations. In the same fashion, the enemy's movement is also highly telegraphed when they are actively engaging, so you can intercept their gap closest with your ultimate. And even if this doesn't leave the enemy overextended, it is still a good option for you to get yourself and your allies out of bad situations. Okay, so here's where it gets tricky. When deciding when to press R, Hina rarely goes for the obvious target, but instead for the safest. Taliyah feels like she is secure behind the wall, which means she is unlikely to expect to get targeted. Therefore, Hina ignores Qiyana and snipes Taliyah instead, so she is locked down for his allies. And he actually does this all the time. In this teamfight here, Hina again doesn't ult the obvious target, which would be Hecarim and a choke point, but instead the stunned Rise, because it is 100% free. He even would have done this had Hecarim been healthier, because safe plays with zero counterplay ultimately let you climb consistently. It is the exact same concept of the mantra "take the free stuff and win the game", which I always preach when it comes to macro decisions. But it actually applies to all of League of Legends, and in Hina's Varus ults it is clearly visible too. However, some of you are probably still asking themselves, why does Hina go for on-hit Shieldbow? Wouldn't Riftmaker or Kraken Slayer be much better for the current tank meta? Well, the answer is that Shieldbow is just the best defensive item Varus can buy early on, and on-hit Varus deals so much damage that staying alive is really his only concern. He is immobile and an easy gank target, but Varus' ultimate in combination with Shieldbow makes him deceptively safe. On-hit Varus can 100 to 0 squishier targets in one rotation, no problem, so a fully committed damage mythic would actually be a waste here. As the saying goes, you don't deal damage when you're dead, but the lifesteal and effective health from Shieldbow just buys you so much time in which you can make use of Varus' crazy DPS. And even when Hina oversteps and gets caught by the nastiest engages, he will always live long enough to get most of his damage off anyway, so he still massively contributes to any fight. Most ADC champions cannot afford Shieldbow because they need the damage from Kraken, and therefore we have the meme of the ADC who gets one-shot by everyone. But Varus just doesn't have to deal with that. It's almost impossible to kill him fast enough, and his damage is still excellent. However, all of this, the ultimates, the sustain, and the crazy DPS with passive and lethal tempo, truly comes together while teamfighting. Your R punishes the enemy for grouping, forcing them to scatter, which is already a huge advantage for your team. From here, Hina chases down the isolated targets, and just like in lane, this allows him to trigger his passive with a stacked lethal tempo. Rageblade and Wit's End are huge payoffs for this in the late game, so you can shred the enemy team to pieces. Furthermore, your range and your defensive mythic provide a lot of safety. It is impossible for the enemy to get to you if you don't want them to, since your ultimate by itself is still game-winning. You can stay at a safe distance and wait for the perfect moment to strike, and the massive AoE crowd control renders the enemy completely helpless while your team just plows through them. All while you didn't even need to get in harm's way yourself. But most fights won't even be fair in the first place. Most commonly, you use your R to find a pick, and then the enemy is left 4v5. No matter in which elo you play, numbers advantage is always the most crucial factor in League of Legends, which is why this safe and consistent playstyle is used by the rank 1 Varus player. Lots of new educational content coming up on this channel, so click the subscribe button, but if you enjoy winning your lanes with superior attack range, you should definitely check out this Caitlyn guide on your screen.